Good morning, guys. Just a quick one today. So have a look at the pictures. What kind of interactions do they show, and why are the behaviours shown in the pictures so important? So we've got a variety of both plant and animals here. Think about what they're doing, why some might be taller, what are the antelopes or gazelles, I don't know which one they are doing in the picture, what's happening over here for this carcass. And then play again when you're ready. This is the whole lesson. It's only 14 slides and some of those are explaining what you guys need to do independently. So this won't take too long. Now, as I said, we're moving on from looking at the abiotic factors to start looking at biotic factors. And this is the first one that we're looking at. It's competition. So we're going to have a look at intra and interspecific competition again. We're going to have a look at population curves for competition and the change over time. And then we are going to do some independent work to see how inter and intraspecific competition influences different populations. So have a go quickly at thinking back to what interspecific and intraspecific competition are and whether they are biotic or abiotic factors. Intraspecific competition is that between members of the same species, so between humans, between foxes, between dogs, whereas interspecific is competition between different species, and those are maybe things that occupy the same environment, so maybe mice and rats, for example. They're going to be competing for the same resources but two different species. And because these factors are living competition between individuals that are alive, it is a biotic factor. Now, this is a growth curve down at the bottom of intraspecific competition. And this is, again, the one that occurs between individuals of the same species, so humans or foxes. And the availability of resources in the environment is what determines the population size. Remember, we've got a carrying capacity of an environment, and that's going to affect the population that can be held confidently by that ecosystem. The greater the availability of resources, the bigger the population that we can support because there's more space, more food, everything like that. So have a go at sketching that graph for me and deciding what is happening at each of those stages in the graph. So there's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Even at the very least, label them growth or decline. Okay, so you can pause now, spend some time thinking about why they might grow, what factors might influence their growth, and why they might decline as well. So stage 1 shows a period of growth. We've got lots of resources, maybe there's a lot of food, maybe there's a lot of space, maybe these organisms have just come to the area, and all organisms in that vicinity have got enough resources to survive and reproduce. And that's going to increase the population size. And in this case, the births is going to be greater than the deaths. We get slow growth. But there is a point where it starts to stop. And that's stage 2. Now in stage 2, that population size at its utmost starts to put pressure on the environment. And resources suddenly become quite limited. There's not enough available for all of the organisms to survive. And that's going to result in a downshot or a reduction in the population numbers, where deaths are going to be bigger than births. Now finally, down at the bottom of stage 2, we've got a small population, quite a low population, very much smaller than the starting population in fact. And there's less competition here. So we can actually label where there's stages of maximum competition and lowest competition, or minimum. And at this stage of minimum competition or lowest competition, there's more resources available. So individuals die, there's fewer individuals, there's still the same number of resources. But in this case, they are able to survive and reproduce, and then that gives us a period of population growth again. So we could label on births is greater than deaths in stage 1, deaths are greater than births in stage 2, and in stage 3 we've got births greater than deaths again. And we get a rise in population. And this is quite a cyclical pattern that we see within intraspecific competition. There's that constant rise and fall, up and down, up and down. And with these explanations, you'll notice that each time we've linked it to the birth and the death rate, and that is a really key ability that you need to do, especially when we're looking at populations. So how does each of these factors link to birth and death rates for organisms? So an example might be food availability. Now, obviously, if we've got more food, the organisms are going to get slightly bigger and therefore they might be able to survive. But if the increase in size increases the likelihood of survival, so maybe over winter, then we're going to get an increased chance of reproduction. And therefore that increased chance of reproduction is going to increase the population as a result. So because the food is more available and animals can eat more of that food, they're going to survive better in the colder months, and therefore they're going to be able to survive and reproduce and make more offspring. Now, the first bit of independent work for today, you can see in this picture, or you might not be able to see, we've actually got 2 oak trees. So one here, I'll show you the trunk, and there's another little one over here. So do some research. How does oak trees, or populations of oak trees, show intra-specific competition? So pause, spend a few minutes doing some research, and play again when you're ready. Alright then guys, a little pit stop now. So we've got 2 plants, I'm not going to read the species names out, also known as bog pondweed and duckweed, that occupy the same habitats. They both live in a pond. What kind of competition exists between those 2 species? What kind of things would they be competing for? What's the result of the competition? And what would happen if one of those species was slightly more adapted to that environment? Should take you about 5 minutes to answer these questions. Make sure you're doing them in full sentences, and we will go through the answers in a sec. So firstly, the type of competition we've got is interspecific. We're between 2 different species. The things that they might be competing for are going to be things like light, space, maybe they're going to need some nutrients from the water or from the soil. They're going to need lots of light to be able to photosynthesize, and that space to be able to grow efficiently as well. Now, the result of this competition is that both population growths are slowed, especially if they are equally as competitive. So the population, or the populations, reach their limit when the environment reaches its carrying capacity. You see how we are using our keywords there, capacity. Now finally, if one species is better suited to the environment, the less well-suited individuals become outcompeted. And outcompeted is an absolutely fine word to use in biology. That means that the less good species in that environment starts to decline in numbers, as the other species, the more dominant species, is overpowering it almost. And this is called the competitive exclusion principle. If 2 species are competing for a limited resource, the one that is able to use that resource most effectively ultimately eliminates the other. Okay, so over time, if you think about us, for example, imagine there was maybe another population of human-like things, but they didn't have any eyes or arms or legs. They might survive less well on hilly terrain, for example, and we're going to be able to use resources more effectively. And over time, the number of those no-armed, no-legged, no-eyed individuals is going to decrease until there's none of them left. Now, a couple more things for you guys to do. This is very independent, and I'm sorry about that, but there's really no point in me carrying on talking to you about competition. So use the photos of the tasks on pages 211 to 213 to just have a look in a bit more detail how competition can affect populations. All of the answers will be at the bottom of OneNote, so scroll down and find those if you are finished. Or when you're finished, should I say. And finally, exam questions. There are 16 marks. Could you have a go at recording your time for them as well? So let me know at the top of your sheet. I'm going to push it out to your OneNote handout folder, a bit like when we did the purple assessment. So you should be able to just write straight onto it. Tell me how long it takes and show me any workings out. Sorry, this was a bit of a slow and rubbish one. It wasn't very exciting, I know. Can't promise it will get any better next time either. I think we're looking at predation, which is equally as dull. But yeah, have a good one and bye-bye.